This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Xcast. The truth is in here. I'm Tony Black, your host as ever, and we are today covering episode 3 of season 2, Blood. And joining me once again after season 1, several appearances, it is Mr. Zach Moore. How are you, Zach?
Hey Tony, good to be back. Season 2, excited.
It's on. The journey has begun. And as is yours, with the Always Hold On to Smallville podcast, which I have become an avid listener to. Now I've started watching the show. How's that all going?
Oh, it's going great, man. It's funny, we started our podcast around the same time, and the X-Files and Smallville have a lot of, crossovers you've been finding out as you watch the show. So yeah. we're on similar journeys here. So
we really are. Not just the fact that obviously they're both shooting Vancouver, but all of the fact that all of the X Factor, that's not the right show.
Different show.
That's the wrong show. That's my next podcast. The X-Files cast all appear in Smallville, pretty much. All of the, Vancouver, Canada-based guys. Mm-hmm. And then the fact you've got Mark Snow recording the music, and he uses most of his X-Files music in Smallville.
He just brought the X-Files CDs over.
Yeah, he did. He's like, well, there's a lot of weirdness in Smallville. Let's just use the same things. I'm constantly having X-Files flashbacks whenever I watch Smallville.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you've been enjoying the show, it seems.
Yeah, I have been. I've been obviously spamming you with tons of tweets going, oh, what? No, this isn't but even though it's got some dodgy plotting, just like the X-Files has. Yeah. Yeah. Lex and Helen and the island. Let's not even go there.
Oh, no.
On the whole, it's really good. It's a really good show. It's really, the second season especially, which you're about to start recording on and releasing, is especially good.
Yeah. But by the time this comes out, we'll be probably a few episodes into the second season, and you're going to be on. And you're going to be on the show coming up in the second season as well, so that's exciting.
I am. I'm excited about the episode we're going to be doing actually, because I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, I can come on there, and you can be me, and I can
ask you the 5 questions of Smallville.
Yeah, which is quite weird actually, because your 5 questions, because of the way the show was recorded, and we started off doing the Xcast with nominated episodes. It actually means that your 5 questions are in the episode Grotesque, which we won't even air for like a year. So we're going to find out a lot about your X fandom after we've had you on the show multiple times.
Yeah, a disruption in the space-time continuum there.
Yeah. For now, anyway, we're into season 2, as we say. So let's crack on and talk about Blood. Blood is the 3rd episode of season 2 of The X-Files. It first aired on September the 30th, 1994, and was written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong from a story by Darren Morgan, in his first credited behind-the-scenes story contribution after appearing as the Fluke Man last week in The Host, which you'll have heard us talk about, and was directed by David Nutter. It sees Mulder investigating a series of mysterious deaths in a small town community where people seem to be killing without any sense of order, and links to a mysterious conspiracy possibly involving subliminal messages.
Yeah, this is never easy. And everybody down here sure likes you a lot, Funchy. And I know it's tough because you're new to this area. Ed, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to let you go. I mean, your work is first rate, and like I said, you're a good guy. But you know the story. Cutbacks and seniority, and you're a low man on the pole.
Could I work part-time?
Guys took up a collection today. It's $100. Look, why don't you stay on till the end of the week?
So, Zach, out of 10, what would you give Blood?
This was a tough one to score because I enjoyed it, but it was kind of weak in some areas, and ultimately I had to settle at a 6.5 for me.
Okay. That's lower than I thought.
Well, yeah, I usually like Darren Morgan. Like, he's like my favorite X-Files, as you'll find out, 2 years from now when we get to the 5 questions of X that you asked me like a year ago.
Time travel.
Darren Morgan is my favorite X-Files writer, and he just provided a story here, and I wonder if there was like the mix of the three of them didn't really come across. I just felt like the narrative wasn't as cohesive as it might have been, and I don't know. Well, we'll get into it here, but out of all of Darren Morgan's efforts on the show, I feel like this is the weakest. And this is a weird place in the series too, because the X-Files are closed right now. Mulder and Scully are working separately, so that's an interesting time of the show as well. So we'll get into it here. Maybe I'll reevaluate it by the end of our conversation, but right now I'm going to sit it at a 6.5. Well,
it's interesting you should say about Darren Morgan because he was supposed to have written it himself, and the idea that was scheduling wouldn't allow him to do that, but the idea was that this would be the first credited Darren Morgan script. So he ended up collaborating on the plot with Glenn and his brother Glenn and James Wong, but the actual credited teleplay goes to them. And given the kind of episodes that Darren Morgan later writes, when he finally writes Humbug later in the season and then beyond, this doesn't have the Darren Morgan hallmarks, does it? It's not got that. It's got moments of humour. In fact, it's got, as I will talk about, it's got some great Mulder one-liners this episode. But it doesn't have that same sense of that it is a very Darren Morgan script, because everything else he's done is his own subgenre, effectively, in this universe.
Yeah, this one doesn't really fit in with the rest.
No.
There are some moments of pure laugh out loud moments, which are great. I'm sure we'll mention those. But I mean, it feels different than a normal episode of the X-Files, so there's that. But it doesn't feel like a Darren Morgan episode, and it makes sense when this is his first time. He's just trying to feel out like, what is this? How do I translate my style to this show? And then, of course, he was part of a writing team here, not just himself. So, and there's one key thing in this episode, and we'll get to at the end, which made me very uncomfortable. It's maybe a personal thing, which is probably sinking the score some, because I have some personal experience with. Not personal experience, you'd say, but. We'll get into it at the climax of the episode. It was like, ooh, they're going here. Ooh, okay.
Is it your personal experience with LSD, Zach?
Yeah, find out more about that in our 5 questions of X next year, guys. But
yeah. When Zach very much, found some kindred spirit in Mulder when he does his trip in Babylon. Oh no, let's not go there again. We've been there before.
See, in this episode, the same uneasiness that I think we all felt in Babylon, I felt at the end of this episode for a specific reason. But we'll get into it.
We'll get there. The idea of the story originally came from films that Darren Morgan had seen pesticides being sprayed. This is according to Chris Carter, being sprayed on unknowing populations by a government who said this was good for you, and what the effect of our government spraying may be now on some level. So, and then the idea came when James Wong and Glenn Morgan developed the idea to do something about the post office. So they wanted to combine all these different... they had 2 words displayed on a bulletin board: postal workers. Find something weird and strange in postal workers.
Well, that shouldn't be hard.
We just alienated a whole job of viewer there. So
because when you control the mail, you control... information.
Oh yeah, that was. People will think we rehearsed that. We really didn't.
Nope.
But and Chris Carter also wanted to do an episode which involved digital readouts. So they wanted to use what were at that point new appliances like fax machines and cell phones.
Beepers, all the 90s technology getting referenced in this episode.
Yeah, I have to say, as a Smallville aside, given you're on, Zach, I did laugh at a point where one of the characters in season 2 talks about how they're getting paged. And I, I'm being paged, I've got to go. I was like, brilliant, pages. Where there wasn't enough pages in the X-Files for me. There should have been more pages.
Thank goodness. I mean, there was enough microfiche in the first few episodes to really cement them as a pre-digital show.
Yeah.
I'm glad they weren't pulling out their pagers all the time. So.
Oh yeah, Mulder, I'm paging you. Yeah, there was some interesting touch points. Really, they wanted to use household appliances to get this idea that there was this insidious force trying to send subliminal messages. Although Glenn Morgan didn't know what subliminal messages really were. And he didn't know, in terms of who was sending them, he didn't know, they had no idea who was behind this.
I don't think they ever did, right?
Yeah, they had no idea. Like Mulder, in the end, has no idea. Neither did the writers. And that, I think, in a way, while that might seem like a bad thing, it contributes to what is good about this episode, in that there is that real sense of who the hell is doing this all the way through. And the fact we don't really ever find out, we don't have any inkling even of who it was.
I agree. I mean, I was seeing somebody's like, I think the AV Club's review of this episode, they mentioned like it's the Syndicate behind it. It's like, no, that never, that's you connecting the dots maybe as a fan or something, but that's never mentioned. And yeah, you're right. As we find out as the X-Files continues, the more mysteries that are answered, the answers are inevitably disappointing. So probably for the best. That they just let this be. It's one of those episodes of like, oh man, like, you know, there's several episodes of like Star Trek where they don't answer like, what was that about? You know, and those are the ones that you keep talking about as a fan because that creates conversation and speculation as opposed to, just another cigarette smoking man plot. Man, all right, you know. Yeah. So I like how it's vague. I agree with you there.
It helps. It does help. It does help the overall episode. I remember Blood more fondly than I think the episode actually warrants in terms of its construction. I do agree with you to an extent. I think I go for about 7.5 though, because I get a lot out of this for reasons that we'll talk about, and I always do enjoy it. And I think it's in a really strong patch of episodes that open the second season. The IMDb score, and this is something I'm borrowing from you actually, and I mentioned this on the first episode, Little Green Men, for the first time. We're taking the always hold on to Smallville idea of quoting IMDb because it is a good aggregator. So you're responsible for this, Zach. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. As long as you understand that the IMDb rating is between 6 and 9.5, it's not a 10 scale. You look at the worst episode of any show, it's like 5.7. Best episode of any show, 9.3. It's like they need a website to convert these into actually scale. But anyway,
it's true. It is true. I have found that. In this case, out of 2,423 votes, it's got 7.7 out of 10. So it's not a stellar one, but it's not lower down. With the X-Files, the majority of them, as you say, are in a similar bracket of number.
It's the same with Smallville. It's like everything's a 7, give or take, it seems.
So I think, on the whole, it has a good reputation, Blood, and I think it is a good episode. I think it's not as good as the previous two we've had in the season so far, but it's probably up there with some of the better season 1 episodes, because season 1 was as we've talked about, was an iffy season as a whole. It had some really good points, it had some middling points, but I think Blood is indicative of the change in strength in terms of the scripts, in terms of the writing, even though it's not up there with season 2's complete best. So without further ado, then let's talk more about the episode. So it begins at the beginning with printing presses and lots of fast-moving machinery. I will say right from the very beginning, I think David Nutter does a tremendous job directing this episode.
I agree with you. I think that the directing and the editing really elevates this episode, the mood, the feel. It's all created by, whatever story shortcomings there are, the mood that the direction creates really elevates it.
Absolutely. Coupled with Mark Snow's music, which is some of the best, actually, in terms of the fact that Snow, I think, creates some incredible sounds for the X-Files over the whole 9-10 years. But sometimes the music works better in episodes than other times. And I think in this case, the fact that every time you see a subliminal message, there is that one piano key that goes ding, ding. Yeah, ding.
It's the inception of its time.
Yeah, it really is. And then coupled with the heartbeat, it's just really good because everything about this teaser is indicative of the whole episode in that it's constantly building up that sense of growing tension. And it's mainly to reflect the character that we meet in the teaser, which is Ed Funch. Great name, Ed Funch.
Classic, just middle-aged American man name, I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe. In doing a very sort of mundane job. I mean, he is one of the most mundane, technically boring characters you could ever imagine in the show. He's middle-aged, he's got no family, he works in like a postal office, he has very little personality because he seems to be really shy and sort of, you know, quite miserable. And then everything bad happens to him throughout the entire episode. His life what life he does have just collapses.
what life he does have, indeed. Yeah, I mean, he's a very sympathetic character. The fact that you're right, he's just kind of a, I don't want to say he's a loser, but he's just the guy.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing exemplary about him. He's just an average milquetoast guy, I guess would be the phrase to use there.
Yeah. It was Darren Morgan who came up with the idea of Ed slowly being driven mad across the entire episode.
He holds it together pretty well, though. I mean, all the other characters like snap on the first attempt, and he doesn't go on his rampage to the end. So good for you, Ed.
But I think that's what really surprises me about this episode. I think that's what is a good thing, in that in any other episode, Ed would have killed somebody before the end of the teaser, or by the end of the teaser. But in this episode, we're introduced to this guy. We see that there's something weird going on when he gets these subliminal messages coming through, you know, saying, kill them all!
Kill them all!
Kill them all! As I was doing notes, I did make a note of every single subliminal message, so I can read them all out confidently, because I wrote them all down throughout. Yeah, and this one, it's kill them all! And so but normally he would have killed somebody by the end. He'd have taken out a gun and massacred people, but he doesn't. And I like the fact the episode sets him up and then moves with him throughout the episode, and then by the end it's always about Ed, but it doesn't pull the trigger too quickly, figuratively.
So now, is he a celebrity spot for you, Tony?
The actor playing Ed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes and no. William Sanderson's his name, isn't it? The actor. And he has been in other things. You might know better than me. Is he a Star Trek alumni?
Well, he's in Blade Runner.
Oh,
so that's what I know him from. And then he was also a voice on a Batman the Animated Series for a few episodes. So
now you see.
So I recognized him.
Yeah, I knew him from somewhere. I'm not a massive Blade Runner fan, actually. I've not seen it many times, and when I have seen it, it's bored me. Much as it's a recognisably great film. If I'm being,
it is one of those. It's kind of like a 2001. You have to watch it with the right mindset. I agree with you. Yeah, but if you ever do want to check it out again, I recommend checking out the final cut, because there's like 4 or 5 different versions of Blade Runner. So check out the final cut. I recommend everyone. So,
but William Sanderson is in that. Yeah, which I'd completely forgotten. But I will say from the outset, he is phenomenal in this. I mean, if you were going to suggest anyone potentially to get a guest starring Emmy, I would give him a potential nod, because he was brilliant in how he complements. He doesn't get much dialogue throughout the entire episode, but when he does appear, you feel every sort of beat of tension and sweat and, you know, awkwardness about this man through his performance.
As boring as the character he is, he really sells that guy just losing his mind, for sure.
Yeah, he really, really does. He really does. There was a couple of things, though, about because he gets sacked, obviously, at the beginning of the episode from the postal office. The guy, his boss says, you know, cutbacks, you were the last guy in. But then he says, why don't you stay until the end of the week? Well, no. You know?
Well, I've fortunately never been fired or laid off, so I've never had to be in that situation. But if I were, I'd be like, no, you know, I'm just going to go home.
Yeah, so, I'm leaving. Yeah. I'm going to go home and watch Netflix. Sorry, mate.
Did you catch how much money they saved for him? They're like, yeah, we passed around a collection for you.
Yeah. In fact,
$100.
$100.
I hope that went a lot further in 1994.
Well, yeah. But also, what got me with that? Now, I don't know if this is a common American thing, but surely, if they'd got a collection together before Ed was told he was being sacked, then the boss had told everyone else, Ed's being sacked, give us some money, because he's leaving, before Ed knew.
Yeah.
Surely that's not good management. Unless I'm missing something here.
That has not been my experience here in the States. No, I don't think it's a cultural thing, but it's kind of like a surprise party, right? So every day, hey, we're putting something together for Ed. Can everybody pitch in, $10 or something? We're going to rent a bowling lane.
Yeah. Do you think maybe the boss lied and said we're gonna do something nice for Ed? Just everyone give me $10, right? It's all good, and then they find out. Oh yeah, it was his payoff.
Like, if I knew he was getting fired or laid off, I would have given you guys a little bit more.
Yeah, it was his terrible payoff of nothing. Yeah, right. Poor Ed. It's no wonder what happens to him, really. But yeah, by the end, he's being told to kill them all, and then we don't see him for a while because once we get out the teaser, we're in a lift, and we're with some people who this one guy who then starts to see no air, can't breathe, kill them all. Which plays into, I suppose, a primal fear about claustrophobia in a lift. Do you suffer from claustrophobia in a lift, Zach?
Not really. I mean, I try to avoid elevators that are too full, so yeah. I try not to put myself in that situation. You know what I mean? I know that I can get out at any time. Now, I mean, if I were stuck in one and like I had started to have the feeling like, oh man, this is going slow. There's too many people in here. It's heavy. I might start to like get a little nervous, but on the whole, I don't concern myself too much with that.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I'm not a big lift fan or elevator fan. I'm not. I've never particularly liked them. I'm not terrified of them, but I wouldn't want to get into a crowded lift, really, because I have seen too many things like this. I've seen too many things like Blood.
We watch too much genre television.
Yeah, I've watched Speed too many times. Like the first 15 minutes of Speed with that lift. I watched something the other day where somebody gets their hands cut off in a lift as well.
That was Smallville. Episode.
That was a Smallville episode. Yeah, it was. It was. I've watched too many things now. My brain has been wired to think that lifts are going to kill you, basically. And Ghost in the Machine, kill them all. Ghost in the Machine in season 1 as well.
Well, he was the only guy in there, so you can't win.
Yeah,
empty, full, you're going to die either way.
You're going to die either way. So, and that's what happens. This guy goes crazy. I was going to say goes postal, but then that's more Ed.
Wrong guy, right?
And that's when Mulder comes in, and he's...
that's the power of the edit, though, right? Because you see like the tension build, and you cut.
Yeah.
And it's the aftermath. And I that's a smart... Obviously, it saves some budget,
Yeah.
but and some gruesome... This is broadcast television. Not going to be show some guy kill people with his bare hands, as they describe when Mulder shows up. But I found that is an effective way to Hitchcockian or whatever, if you will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it is. It does work out in that sometimes these things work out for the better, don't they? But in this case, it allows us to get a strange event in there without tipping the hand about Ed, and for Mulder to turn up and not say anything for quite a while, as the local sheriff Spencer, who becomes his partner for a lot of this. Really, he's the guy who runs around with him. Just starts...
a rare positive local law enforcement.
Yeah.
They run into so much conflict with local law enforcement throughout the series, and this guy was actually very helpful and very friendly.
He was. He wasn't a douche. He didn't start getting angry that the FBI were there or thinking Mulder's an idiot. This guy's like, oh, okay, you're a specialist. Cool. I need some help because we're a tiny little town and I'm at my depth, and it's really good in that sense. But it's quite funny that Mulder doesn't say anything for like 5 minutes while this guy's explaining everything. There are moments where I'm thinking you would react. You would at least go, oh yeah, okay, cool. He's just nodding at him, going,
Classic. The company was just like, yeah, it's fine. I don't need to act today.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he did have lines, but Duchovny just wasn't in the mood. He's like, I don't care. I'm not going to say anything. Fine. I'm just going to nod at you. Dude. Yeah. But it works. It adds to a certain Sherlockian mystique with Mulder, I think. And then by the time he sees the cracked screen in the lift and says, has anyone noticed this cracked screen? Which obviously must be some sort of clue, but you've all missed.
Mm-hmm. And that's what Mulder's for. He sees what no one else sees. He makes the connections people don't, right?
Yeah. Even though they would have all searched that lift a lot and surely must have seen that screen was cracked.
Look, they're out of their depth, Tony. They're a small town.
It's true. as the sheriff says, he says, yeah, we're a small, tiny town. Nobody kills anyone in this town. Hasn't happened for years. And then suddenly lots of locals are going around shooting people or killing people or everything like that.
Did you catch the OJ reference, which was really awkward and out of place?
No, I didn't. What was that?
So there's a couple of OJ references in this, and I have OJ on the mind this year because if you haven't seen this, you probably don't care about this because this wasn't a big deal to you. But the OJ Simpson trial was like the trial of the century here in the U.S.
Oh no, we know, yeah, we were interested in OJ.
Okay, cool. So I don't know how far his interest reaches across the pond.
Oh
but,
yeah.
So the sheriff guy, he says something like, "Yeah, we're a small town. You don't see celebrities pulled over." On the freeway holding a gun to their head or something. I was like, is that an OJ reference? I think it is. And then later on when they start showing, later on in the episode where they start flashing all those like terrible events that have been going on, you see the classic white Bronco driving down the road. And the reason I have OJ on the brain, that's why I caught these sort of subliminal references. I guess at the time, 94 was when it happened. So that would have been like fresh on people's minds. Like way to be topical, X-Files. The People versus OJ Simpson. Brilliant show. It came out this year. It's like a 10-part miniseries. Cuba Gooding Jr. plays O.J. Simpson. It's about the trial and everything. So good. So nostalgic.
Yeah.
Like, it is the greatest nostalgia trip ever, and I highly recommend it to anyone listening. If you enjoy good television and you like, if you have any interest in O.J. Simpson trial at all, very fascinating breakdown of the show. It's like 10 episodes, the show, but the trial. It's like 10 episodes. I highly recommend it. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've heard of that. It's been. I think it's been on British television at some point.
Yeah, I think it's available on home video now, so it's readily available if you want to check it out.
Yeah, so. that might be worth looking at. I didn't catch that though. Yeah, it's my.
It would have gone by me too had I not just watched this show.
Well, yeah.
It's like, celebrity with a gun to his head. What are they talking? Oh, OJ. Oh, 94. Oh, okay. We're being ripped from the headlines. The X-Files. But anyway,
being topical. But yeah, he is explaining that this place, these things don't happen in Franklin, and unfortunately they do because now we're back with Ed for the first time, and he's at an ATM. He's getting all overcome. There's a little child with their mother there, and he's losing it. And then he sees security guard. Ding! Take his gun. Ding! Kill them all! Ding! 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 I'm going to be really annoyed to do that all the way through. But then
got the sound clip for that.
I should have done. Maybe I need to just edit that in. I could probably get that actually. I might have to do it.
If you have a keyboard, yeah, you can get it.
Yeah, he will, yeah. And so he sees the gun and there's going on, and he can't do it, and he does one of those little sort of those noises that William Sanderson does all the way through. He goes, punches the screen, and just runs off.
As we're describing it, this scene sounds absurd, okay?
Yeah.
But if you watch it, it's like, once again, the editing and the direction is really what makes this work, and his performance as well, because without all those working together, this would be like, what is this? Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. And it is ridiculous, but it's really unsettling. Like, if you saw a guy doing that on the side of the street, you'd be freaked out. You'd keep your distance,
You really would. And he's one of those things that, describing it and even reading the script, it wouldn't work unless you have that right combination of really good acting with, again, hardly any dialogue, with good editing, good direction. And it does work. It really helps, again, build up that tension that Ed is seeing this thing and he doesn't understand it, and it's overtaking him and he's fighting that urge, which he does all the way through. But then, obviously, as Ed is still going on, we've got then, because Mulder and Scully, we haven't even seen Scully yet. This is the first time we start to see her, but because Scully isn't there, and because of the whole thing that obviously the X-Files are still closed, which isn't something that is mentioned as much in this episode as the last two. In The Host, it was the subplot all the way through. And obviously in Little Green Men, it was the plot. In this, we know that the X-Files are closed. We know that Mulder's been pulled off. And we find out in this spiel, actually, when he's talking, he's reciting to Scully his notes, how he's been brought in because of his criminal profiling days. He's when he was working for violent crimes, because they can't understand why these locals are acting so out of character. I thought that was good in that it calls back slightly to Mulder's days of when he was effectively like Frank Black in a Millennium. He was that kind of guy. But in some respect, there's a little bit too much in this episode of Mulder talking in voiceover and explaining the plot, because he doesn't have Scully to do that with.
Right. I mean, it's very odd that when that happens, it's very rare in the show when that happened, just monologue in the middle of the show. I think, Grotesque, you mentioned it earlier, our first episode together. There's a lot of that, and it's like, what? Like Captain's Log starting? But I mean, the trope of that works because Mulder and Scully are separate and they're sending each other their case reports. So I'm like, okay, that at least there was at least a reason in the story for them to do that, but still, it's just a whole lot of exposition. The show don't tell, right? And all they're doing is telling.
They're telling, yeah, because they have to, because they're connecting dots that they need to connect. When you could have had a scene, you would normally have a scene where Mulder and Scully are at somewhere, or they're investigating something, and they will talk it through while they're doing something, and it works better. So it is trying to get around the fact they haven't got Mulder and Scully together by doing little things. So it doesn't work massively well. There is a great joke in this though, where halfway through he mentions aliens, and Scully says, "I was wondering when you get to that."
That was a good line. That was a good line.
It's almost like a little in-joke to the fact that in every episode of season 1 almost that wasn't about aliens, there was always some reference as if to say, is this UFOs? Could this be aliens? And it took them ages to get away from that until everyone went...
Even the one that sticks out to me is Eve.
Yeah.
Where he really thinks it's abductions for the first 20 minutes of the episode. Or something. It's like, no, it's not aliens
there's
every
no
time.
Aliens. Guys. Just leave it alone, Mulder. Not everything is aliens, all right? Chill out, dude.
It's all connected to Samantha.
It's not. So that was a good little line. But then once we're caught up, we now have the next unlucky killer on our list, which is Mrs. McRoberts, in what has to be the most hilariously creepy garage ever put on film. It's so it's mad. I mean, why is she going there that late? Yeah, it really is trying to lay on that fear of attack and rape really thick and make this guy look really sinister.
Do you think the guy was being creepy? Obviously he was being just a typical sleazy car repairman. I found about 3 more things. It's going to cost you a lot of money to fix, but you can't do without it. I mean, that's classic, mechanic talk there. But I don't think he's being too sleazy. I think it was ridiculously over the top. It's dark, and he's the only guy there, and the lighting is very just stark. There's only one light in this entire garage. Although I guess they're trying to get you in her mindset, so I guess that works, right? But you're right. It's pretty absurd. And then
well, because it's like it's intentionally being created so things would happen that wouldn't happen. Like he's saying, "Come over here next to me." Would you really? I mean, it's I really don't think, even if you were a bit sleazy, I just don't know. It's too on the nose for me. And if it was some sort of weird dream sequence or something like that, I'd buy it more. But if this to be real, there's just something a little bit silly about it all. It's really trying to wrong foot you very obviously. And then when it turns out that he's not actually a rapist, even though the machine says, liar, he's a liar. He'll rape you. He'll kill you. Kill him first.
Ding, ding.
Ding, 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 ding. It's, I was just like, okay, I get it. And then, obviously, she does, and...
what did she kill him with? Like a pipe or something?
Something like a pipe or a big jack or something like that. I don't know.
Well, that got dark fast. It went from, funny dark to, hardcore, oh, dark.
Shit, yeah. She's actually killed him. But... I just think looking back, it's a bit silly. And the actress playing Mrs. McRoberts is, again intentionally sort of. I'm sure she was either a porn star, Kimberly Ashton Gear, or she was in Red Shoe Diaries or some softcore stuff. I'm sure she was. But
see, if this was a true Darren Morgan episode, she would be Professor Bambi. From,
exactly.
Copenhagen or whatever. I can't ever say that right. Copenhagen
War of the Copenhagen.
Yeah. See, they took that. They took that to full effect. They embraced that with this one. This didn't quite go quite far enough.
No.
So I see your point there.
It's like something that Darren Morgan would have spoofed, but it doesn't know it's funny.
Yeah. Yes, that's the. It's not self-aware.
It's not that particularly self-aware, and so. Yeah, she does that deed, and then we're at the crime scene afterwards, and Mulder comes out with a brilliant little one-liner when he's there with the latex on, and he goes, "Pardon my rubber."
Yeah,
brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I just found it so funny. Obviously it leads them to Mrs. McRoberts with a little bit of functional kind of, let's get us to this is the weakest part of the episode, because it's basically trying to help establish the ideas of the chemicals involved and all of the underpinning sort of weird science that is in this episode. But you've got all this stuff with Mrs. McRoberts by the time that, Mulder gets there. Questions are, he knows, kill them both. And then she becomes robotic. Again, it's that whole thing of that she's robotic, she's got the knife, and then Mulder goes to touch her, and then she's like, and kills him. We get it. You're afraid of being raped, okay? You're extremely afraid of being raped, it seems. Like, we get that it builds this up, but it just felt, it just was really on the nose for me. I just think you could have had a more interesting way of introducing this idea that these chemicals or whatever's Scully's finding is building up some kind of fear, like a fear toxin, almost. Yeah,
it didn't really organically connect to everything else. And I don't know what I don't know what they could have done differently, but I felt like they could have done something different. And then when she attacks Mulder, the sheriff guy's there with them, and he shoots her, and Mulder tries to, it's like, no, don't shoot her, because he wants to keep her alive and study and ask and all these things, and the guy just kills her anyway, and then Scully does the autopsy,
and she goes, I think she goes above and beyond, because she extracts chemicals from the eyeball. Now, how many people extract things from an eyeball when they're doing an autopsy? That can't be a normal thing. I was like, whoa! Like, you were going above and beyond here, Scully. But she finds...
Well, I guess they didn't know what else to look, I guess. I mean, they had been going back and forth. Because I'm not really sure how much time had passed either. Because they're reading these case reports back and forth, and I'm like, well, how long has Mulder been there? And was this just a day? I don't know. Like, I didn't really have a good sense of time in this episode. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it's obvious. You get the feeling that it goes over a fair few days, or a few days anyway. Because Ed's journey is, I've been sacked, I'm unemployed, I'm looking for a job, and that builds up over him. So, yeah. The time, X-Files is usually not too bad with the idea of time and how it works and how long the episodes take. It's not too bad with that.
Smallville is terrible.
Smallville is really bad.
As you go through my podcast, as you catch up on episodes, we have a little. It's not like a section or whatever, but we usually have a conversation about what day is it.
What day is it? Yeah,
because these kids are supposed to be in school. But anyway,
but once you pick at these things, they really do stand out at you. But to be fair, the idea that there are unusual amounts of, adrenaline in the system, and there are chemicals being extracted from the eyeball makes sense, because obviously if it's subliminal messaging, it is something that people are seeing, and it is something that's transmitting into the brain. So it makes more sense. And I think one of the things that I like about this episode is that it doesn't have to go into too much weird supernatural areas. In the end, it is a weird science conspiracy with shades of conspiracy idea.
Yeah, it's all achievable by humans.
Yeah,
right? It's not some crazy pseudoscience, or, well, I guess it is kind of a pseudoscience, but it's all based in reality, and there's nothing too fantastical about it. Like, you can totally believe that if the government wanted to do this, they could do it without any too much leaps of imagination or believability.
Then it's like an extension of the kind of things they've already done with testing on LSD and some of the things that we hear about later. Because the idea is that the compound combined with adrenaline and other substances linked to the phobia of whatever the person's afraid of creates this weird chemical substance. So it's, it isn't too far away in terms of a stretch.
Well, it actually kind of reminded me, the way Scully starts describing it, is it kind of reminded me of the Joker's plan in Batman '89, where it's like it's a random combination of chemicals, and it doesn't really necessarily have one formula. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what it is. And the catalyst for all these people seems to be if they have a phobia, because their adrenaline being heightened is what triggers it. I mean, that's kind of how I interpret it. But this episode it seems to have a lot of dead ends. Like, they think they have an answer, and then it's like, no, this is not the answer. Yeah. So ultimately, you're like, well, what was it? But like we were saying, that kind of helps, I guess, because I'd rather have no explanations than some really lame explanation.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. The fact that they're quite open about the fact that there's no definitive proof. It's just that something is going on. These people are being tested. And it could even be that the ultimate goal of it is uncertain, and that's why all these random things are happening, because whoever's in control of it is testing. You know, it is an exercise. So it's really interesting. But as they're starting to put these pieces together, we're back with Ed, and he's now sacked. He's put on his best suit. He's gone down to, I assume, somewhere like the mall, and he's looking for a job. And then he meets this charming woman and says, "Have you got any jobs available?" And she goes, "No." And then she puts a sign in front of him that says, "We'll be back in 1 hour," and walks. I said, "Cheeky woman!" It's like
she's so disgusted by him. She like puts up the like "We'll be back" sign and walks away. Like,
fuck you, lady.
Kick the guy when he's.
Do you know what I mean?
Way to kick the guy when he's down. Yeah. You know, he just put on his best suit to come to your silly department store. Yeah. You know, and you just shut him down. And then see, all these things add up to his breaking at the end.
Yeah.
And then and then after this, as he's dejected, he wanders around this department store, which I always find funny looking around. In the background, like what they have for sale and stuff like that. Like I saw some like VCRs or whatever in the background. But then he goes to like this TV bank, right? And it's to us, the normal person, it's playing, cartoons and sports and stuff.
Yeah.
But then of course we start. What do we hear, Tony? We hear.
Well, yeah, but first we hear shh with the static, and then. Dum, 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 dum. Dum, 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 dum.
And this is where we see OJ again.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Bronco, and we see all that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's this actually is my favourite moment in the episode. I think this is the point that if you had to distill the episode, I think into a scene, into an image, I think this would be it. Because this moment where Ed looks at this TV screen and then he sees these flash of images of horrible violence and murder and Charles Manson and all these things and OJ and all this stuff. And then you get all the editing, this an amazing shot that Nutter does of the whole, all of the screens, and Ed standing there with all of the screens in front of him, and we're watching from behind. It's an incredible shot, and it's just all flashing, and it's like it's zoning in on him. And then at the end, you get the behind you, do it like that, and it's guns.
This very very handy neon sign that says guns.
Guns. but it's that suggestion that whatever is behind all this is wanting to incite violence. It's
watching them too.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think when you first saw it, you think, oh, are these people just going crazy, right? But they're not. Something is observing their surroundings, right, and telling them like, do this, do that. Like you said, they're trying to control, a violent outbreak.
Yeah. And they are, like you say, they're surveilling everyone, and quite often, the horrible, scary thing is surveilling them through their own appliances or through their own, whether it is a lift you're taking to work or a microwave or your TV. It is that idea, and it's ahead of the curve again, the X-Files, because obviously with the age of online gaming and cameras in the home and all these things that you have on modern TVs and modern systems, consoles, etc. There has been a lot of people saying, well, how do we know that Sony or Microsoft aren't watching us in our homes? Mm-hmm. And in this case, it is who is this nefarious, government, whatever it is, and how can they find out where we are? How are they watching us? It's a terrifying idea, and it's in that age as well. In the early 90s, when all these appliances were becoming more readily available, even more in the digital age, the beginning of the digital age, it's a scary idea. And it's really effective in this scene with Ed.
I mean, and part of me was like, is this episode supposed to be like a critique on our reliance on technology or something like that? Like, I'm not really sure what its message was trying to be. I think maybe if they tied, and not to get too specific on like the answers to all the questions at the end, but maybe if they tied it into some like kind of return to nature group who's like anti-technology. I don't know if that's too cliche or something. Then you could at least understand the motivations behind why they're doing this. I don't know. That's just something I thought of because, obviously they're using the technology. Maybe they're making a statement about, the way everyone's so dependent on. I mean, you see later on, like somebody's got a pager and like a digital watch or whatever. Like all these, any kind of screen, any kind of technology is like taking over their life. I don't know. I thought maybe that might have been an idea floating around somewhere between all these guys writing the episode. Not sure.
Well, it could have been. I think they were trying to focus much more on the the effect rather than the cause or the reason. I think they wanted to explore what it does to the human brain and what it incites these people to do more than getting into the why of it all, which I suppose is scarier, but yeah, it would have added a little bit of extra if they had gone that way. But then we're back with Mulder as Ed is going towards the guns, so we know where this is going with him. And then we're back, it's the gunmen. They're back for the first time since EBE. This is only their second appearance on the show, the Lone Gunmen. So it's nice to see those guys again, and they pop in for a brief scene. Frohike gets to be a bit more pervy towards Scully, even though she's not there. It's
men like you that give her version a bad name. I love that quote from Mulder, right?
It's a great line. Yeah. And he's right. Yeah, they come in here and they do their usual thing, which they did earlier on in the show, before they got more to do later on in the season and then their own show, the series and then their own show.
That was a great success, wasn't it?
Well, let's not talk about that. Before they got weird psychic powers and predicted 9/11, but we won't go there yet. But then you've got them just popping in for a scene, and they give a little bit more information about what's going on with the chemical, and talking about these bugs that that can release like a chemical response and everything like that, and it's insecticide.
But this is what I'm talking about. It's yet another dead end. Like they think this might be something, but it leads to nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Because like this ultimately is not an answer. But I think you said it best. Like they come in and do their regular thing.
Yeah.
It's basically like insert generic lone gunman scene here. Right? That's what this is. Right? I mean, I love seeing them. Don't get me wrong, but there wasn't really anything to this scene other than the Frohike stuff, which I think the funniest thing was he has those goggles and he has like some night vision goggles, and Mulder's like, "Can I borrow those?" He's like, "If you give me Scully's phone number."
Yeah. Oh, it's great. Frohike just being Frohike. But yeah, you're right. Apart from that, it is just them showing him a film from the 50s, showing the the spraying on plants and making the point
and people at the pool, which is like very disturbing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That is real footage of people who would have actually, it's all real stuff in that they would have actually got breast cancer and radiation, all this from this spraying in the 50s, all these really, these old footage of people happily playing and thinking, fucking hell, you're probably dead in 10 years because of that. So it's horrible. But I think it's trying to, again, it's what the X-Files does this a lot. And sometimes you're right, it doesn't always go anywhere, but they try and tie it into a real life conspiracy theory. And in this case, it was that whole idea of spraying, and this is just the next step of it. And so, it is a little bit of a superfluous scene, but it just connects a couple of dots up, which, I think Morgan and Wong just wanted to get them back. I think they were just like, they'd written EBE, they'd enjoyed it, they were like, let's get those guys back.
Well, it worked better here than it did in Babylon, right, Tony? But moving on.
No, I think if ever you're on an episode and the gunmen are in it, we're just going to have to, get angry about Babylon again. Just don't do it. Don't waste them. So, this is the point where Mulder goes off looking basically, as he does, for some spraying. And he gets sprayed by a helicopter. And this is where Scully, for the first time, properly comes into it, instead of just getting his reports and, sending him the odd thing, to test him whether or not he's, he's going to suffer from all these ailments. And this is where he has a good confrontation with Larry Winter, who was introduced earlier, and he's the local council guy, who doesn't want to know when Mulder's basically making the point of that you can't spray anymore. Whatever you're spraying has this insecticide going on that is going to heighten these people's fear responses and things like this. And then he brings up the spooky evidence line. And I'm like, well, how would you know about that? Whenever these people do it, I'm like, how do you know?
Well, I don't think, he's like, I looked you up, Mulder, and your spooky theories. And it's like, you're right. It's almost like in a specific reference because I've never used the word spooky ever in my life to describe something. And it's like so many people just seem to, because they want to set off a trigger in Mulder, right? It's like calling Marty McFly chicken, right? It's to call Mulder like spooky, right? He's like, don't give me that crap or whatever Mulder tells him. Yeah. But,
It's that character that we've seen already a lot in season 1. The
Paul Reiser from Aliens.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah,
he reminded me a lot. And we had that same discussion when we did Darkness Falls. He reminded me a lot of that guy. He looked kind of the same, just like an older white guy with a mustache.
Yeah, the old
bureaucratic guy.
That's it. The bureaucratic, officious older guy in the mustache who just doesn't think anything's. And
it's fine.
It's fine. This guy thinks he's justified because the irradiated bugs were destroying people's crops. And that's why he thinks that this spraying is justified, because he thinks he's saving people's livelihoods, when Mulder's saying, well, you're spraying all this dodgy stuff, and this guy doesn't want to know, and he doesn't want to have it. The question is, of course, whether he's in on it or not. And I'm inclined to think he's not, but he's just being awkward, really. Which is why then when the sheriff comes back in and says, I'll do you a deal, basically, I will stop, we'll test anyone's blood, but you can't link it to the LSDM chemical. So Mulder's like, oh, God. Again, I can't prove any of this is going on, but if I want it to stop.
Also in this scene is the great bait and switch with the TV ad for the gym.
Yes.
So good.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We get that in the middle, don't we? When he's having the conversation with Scully, and you see the do it. And then it's an advert for a gym.
So good. See, that's Darren Morgan at work right there.
Yeah, that's very clever, because it helps Mulder take that leap into the subliminal messaging, which is
that's what connects it for him. Yeah,
that's the leap he takes, and then you do get a really good moment with him and Scully, where he basically lays all this out and goes, "What if it's the subliminal messaging?" And she's like, "Oh, what? What are you talking about?"
And then friendly sheriff guy walks out, and Mulder says, he's probably one of those people who thinks Elvis is dead.
That's a great line.
Another one-liner. You're right. He
Another great
really
line.
was on point with the one-liners this episode.
So many good one-liners in this, definitely. But it's linked. The whole episode now, by this point, has got them to the point where they've linked up the why, and it basically allows us to get much more into Ed and to the plot line there, because it all starts to come together. So Eddie's twitching in his chair in his featureless barren house in his flat, just
exactly I would imagine his house to be.
Yeah,
really,
just grim. There's nothing there.
He did have a wife that died like 10 years ago. They say it's like, okay, good. At least he was happy once.
That's true. He was happy. They all went wrong, and now he sits in an armchair that doesn't look like anything else in his house and watches an old TV, which looks like it was made in 1965. Right. And then he's got the blood drive donors who he sees also at the mall. The whole idea of blood and his fear of blood is actually it carries through really well. Actually, there's lots of references or moments where he's confronted with the idea of blood. And in this next one, it's the woman at the door and the buzzer, the bam, 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 bam buzzer, which is really annoying.
I put his rampage completely on the shoulders of this aggressive cholesterol checker. Like she rings the doorbell once, twice, the third time. Okay, move on. It's like, this is all your fault, woman.
I know. How many times? It's like you just don't press a buzzer that much, and it's the most annoying buzzer I've ever heard in anything.
Right.
It just goes through your brain. It's really good in terms of sound. This episode's so good in terms of sound and how it builds up this tension and builds up this, this fear in Ed, and to the point where he just smashes his TV. And I do think the moment when he picked up that gun, I did think, you must be going to shoot that woman. You surely you're going to open that door and blast her away. Can you just stop buzzing like that? That's what. But then Mulder and Scully have connected a few dots with potential people who might be, on a list of blood drive donors, and they end up at Ed's apartment, and we get another.
They found that they didn't get, like, the whole reason is there was a certain amount of people that did not submit to the cholesterol test, and that guy was one of them, and that's how they tie it. That's how they tie it all together.
Yeah. The cholesterol test, and then they're at the apartment, and Mulder comes out with another great one-liner when if they find the lock's been broken or the door's ajar, and he says, "Frustrated Jehovah's Witnesses."
Yeah.
That's great. Just more brilliant.
He's making up for his non-dialogue the first 5 minutes he was in the episode with these singers. He's just shooting them out,
I wonder if they're just David Duchovny, though. And I imagine because Darren Morgan's involved, they're Darren Morgan lines. But I sometimes think Duchovny ad-libbed a little bit occasionally.
With a guy like Duchovny, you gotta expect that they learn that he was pretty sly with stuff, and know what, David, if you got something, just say it. And if we don't like it, we'll edit around it. But just go with it, David. You know?
I think they got there. Yeah. So Ed's heading off with the gun, and he's being taken to his destination. He gets on the bus, but he soon finds out that they're waiting. Get off, and then that poor bus driver, when he says, "Let me off," And then he's like, no, we're going to get to the next stop. And he's like, let me off! And he just screams.
He loses his mind.
I mean, that was terrifying. And he goes, oh, brother, no!
That's why this guy's such a great actor.
Yeah.
Because he went from this like meek, guy who's got, just the weight of the world on his shoulders, depressed, a wallflower type or whatever, to just freaking out at these people, and you buy it. You buy the fact that this guy is just snapped, right? And it's a great, just unsettling moment.
Yeah. He's really unsettling. He really is. He just gets...
because he looks so normal, too.
Yeah,
like, he doesn't look like a bad, evil guy. Like, he looks just some dopey guy you see on a bus. Right?
Yeah.
Just
It's the guy next door thing, isn't it? It's that, he could be anyone, who snaps like this. And then it builds to the point where he gets into the blood drive. They think he's gone to the hospital, but he gets off and he's going to the blood drive, and he goes up the clock tower and gets the gun out and starts picking people off. But it's a great sequence.
Well, yes, I guess it is and all, but this is what I have problems with. So, like, this is unsettling to me because you guys talk about like in space, right? Where they talk about the Challenger, like, ooh, that's I don't know, we should do that, guys, and maybe we shouldn't go here. And then we always joke about Babylon, but I think we all felt kind of twitchy about like, oh, we're gonna have Muslim terrorists blow up a public place. And there's not going to be a twist. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me personally, like, so I'm from Texas, America, right? I know, right? For all you guys who don't know where Texas is. So we had, my dad went to the University of Texas, okay, which is the T Longhorns. People might know it. It's a pretty nationally known school. They had a clock tower shooting in the 60s, which was just like this. There was a college. They have a famous clock tower on campus, and this was the first mass shooting like this in American history. And this was in it was 50 years ago, actually, this year. It was in 66, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And so it was exactly like this. This guy went up to a clock tower with, a rifle and started picking people off, and they didn't really, and it was a big kind of a massacre because, like, they didn't know how to respond to it back then because, this did not happen. I think they killed I believe it was like almost 30 people got injured. I think half of them died. So like this is, and my dad went to school there like 10 years later. So this was like a big deal, and they actually closed off the clock tower for several years because of this, and it's kind of a big deal, So, and I'm sure they took inspiration, if you want to call it that, from that real life event, because that's exactly what this is. Like I'm sure that they knew about this and like, oh, we should incorporate this, and someone should have said no, you shouldn't, because so that's why to me I'm like, ooh, I feel really uncomfortable watching this because I heard stories from my dad that knew people or whatever, and anyway, that's what I was referring to at the beginning of the episode. I was like, yeah, there's one big thing in this episode that kind of makes me not like it as much as I might otherwise have, and I know like everyone brings something different to their experience watching this stuff, but to me I was like, this is, I don't know, and let me ask you this, Tony. Do you think, with the culture we live in now, with school shootings, mass shootings in public places, do you think they'd have a climax to an episode like this, of genre television?
My instinct is to say no, but then in Babylon you did have a very obvious Muslim terrorist.
See, I thought that too. So that thought crossed my mind. I was like, well, Babylon. So I guess so.
I don't know if Chris Carter thinks that way.
Not going to stop Chris Carter. No,
yeah,
it's not.
Because
anyway, that's my personal experience. I don't know if I'm bringing too much baggage to it, but having so much like knowledge, like secondhand knowledge of that being such a big deal, I was like, I don't think they should have done this. That's just my take.
Well, no, obviously I didn't know about that incident, but what I took from it, what I thought of was whether or not this was influenced by any things that had happened in other places. And afterwards, there was, I'm sure, and I can't remember how long ago this was, but I'm sure there was a lot of sniper killings in Washington, D.C., wasn't there? And I can't remember when that was. It was maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and somebody with a sniper was picking people off randomly.
That sounds familiar.
I cannot quite remember when it was, but it was a horrible thing, and quite a lot of people died. And there seem to be a lot of these shootings, and it's, obviously, and the gun debate continues, and the shootings it continues to happen in America and in England to an extent, although a much lesser extent. But it's the whole idea of it's a risky area to go in, and I think the reason they did it is because they were trying to do something that would be horrendous, and they were trying to show that whatever these people were trying to create in Ed and all of these ordinary people would be the capacity to do something so horrific. It's interesting because David Nutter talks about the final scene, and Glenn Morgan and James Wong talk about it, how that it was influenced by edits to Apocalypse Now, actually, and it was how jump cuts had been edited into it, and they're talking specifically about the scene where we see Ed losing it.
That was effective. I mean, I think like we were talking about this whole time, the editing and the directing like made that an effectively well-made scene. I agree with you there for sure.
Yeah, they said, and Nutter said at the ending, I tried to allow William Sanderson to just get into it and let the camera roll while he did so. He was the kind of actor that wanted to emotionally get into it. I let him get pumped up for it and film what he was doing. So most of the stuff you see in the episode came during the prep. So I think what they were trying to do was get that idea out there. Whether it was tasteful, that's a good question.
Like, I'm not saying like we can never have shootings in any fixture again. You know, you know what I mean? Like,
no, I know. It's a double-edged sword, really. It's good because it is these kind of things that need to be talked about, you know, in reference to these episodes, because everything is inspired by something, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's a question of whether or not where they got this from and whether it's effective or not.
Unlike the actual event where they shot the guy, you know, shot and killed him at the UT campus shooting, Mulder comes up here and talks him down, huh?
Yeah, well, I quite like that actually, that he doesn't die at the end. Because I think the idea is really that Ed isn't in control of his actions at this point. You know, he's as much a victim as everybody else, really, and that's something you see throughout the episode. In that he's not a bad person; he's actually a bit of a tragic figure. You know, he's got no life. He lost his wife. He's got no job. He's down on his luck. So to actually have him killed, he's not a monster. He's just a victim.
They don't explicitly show that he killed anyone either. So
yeah,
I mean that's redeemable, I guess. You know, you don't see like, you know, bodies falling and that kind of thing. So I mean, he's just wildly shooting. Obviously, he's not the kind of guy that would have done this otherwise. So he probably doesn't know what he's doing.
Well, yeah, and that's what
that makes it more sympathetic.
Yeah, and that's what you see in those sequences when he's in the clock tower and he's going as he's shooting because he's terrified of what he's doing and he's freaking out because he's like, "This, what am I doing? And I can't control it." And it's terrifying, really. But it was good the way Mulder manages to basically talk him down effectively and uses his fear of blood to overpower him, really, which is...
That was very clever, very smart.
Yeah, which is really good, and it does tie into the whole idea of the episode. But then we get what I genuinely think is one of the best final moments of The X-Files. The X-Files is really good, was one of those shows that did last scenes brilliantly. And quite often it was the episodes where you would get something thrown in there that made the mystery even more chilling. And it happens a few times. One of my favourites is the end of Die Hand, Die Verletzt, which we'll get to later on in the season, which obviously is the writing on the board at the very end, which just leaves me with chills every time. And this is a similar one, because Mulder then... Ed's packed off in the ambulance and everything like that, and Mulder gets a text. Well, he's about to make a call on his old phone with the big...
I don't think we had texting back then. I mean, to us, it's like, oh, we got a text message. But to them, it was like, oh my God, I'm seeing letters on my phone. It's blowing my mind. This is incredible. What is this crazy technology from the future?
Yeah, on my phone that I have to pull a wire out of the top of. And yeah, he gets there's a little bit of static, isn't there? There's that kind of noise, like a modem kind of noise. And then 4 immortal words. All done. Bye-bye. Chills, man. Chills. Right. Chills. Like,
because you don't know who these people are, what they wanted. They're done now, and then are they going to move on to another town and do this again? Like, you don't know what their end game is. And I mean, we've been going back and forth about the motivations behind the people behind this, but that is, you know, not knowing. Like I said, it creates that conversation, and you're like, what is this all about? And your mind races, and that's what great fiction does. It makes you think, you know.
Yeah, it really does. And by the end of this, like you say, you're thinking, well, yeah, all the questions that are going around Mulder's head, because he just stares at that phone and the camera, and you get Scully then, because he's calling Scully, and then Scully answers the phone, and she's like, Mulder, where are you? Mulder! She's
classic Scully. Mulder, where are you going? Where are you? What are you doing?
Because he's
so disrespectful to her all the time.
Yeah, he is, because he never tells her what he's doing. He just pisses off and leaves the phone. And in this case, he's just like, he's not answering, and that's the classic sort of, Mulder, are you okay? Because you're not talking. But in this case, you understand because he's just staring at this phone and going, oh my God. What?
Trying to process all this crazy stuff that just happened.
Yeah. I'm like, well, what the hell? Who? What? And it's just a great final. It's a great final moment, that just leaves everything out there. And I love it. I love it for that. It makes the episode a winner for me. That final sequence alone is just brilliant. But yeah, it's ultimately, I think, Blood, and that's it. That's the end, basically. And I think it's a good episode. I think it's a solid X-File. I think it has moments. It has some great lines. It has moments that punch it up above into a really good X-File. But then there are quite a lot of functional scenes, and there are some unintentionally funny moments, or moments like the end, which could be a little bit unsavoury.
That's what, to me, I think, we have a point between us in the difference. You said 7.5, I said 6.5, and to me personally, like the shades of the UT, clock tower shooting really drop it down a point for me. And that's just what I bring to it. But, there are some great moments in this episode as well. So, I mean, like I said, 6.5 is pretty fair in my opinion, but, definitely not a bad episode in any way. And it creates conversation. It's interesting to think about. So, yeah. I mean, it's a solid one, like you said. It's a solid X-File.
Solid X-File. And you can't ask for more than that, really.
Don't kill me.
And put it down, Ed.
I can't. They won't let me.
I know they won't, Ed. I know they won't let you.
Then you make me put it down, man. You do it.
If you don't put it down, I'm gonna have to shoot you. Or you're gonna have to shoot me. There's gonna be blood everywhere.
So, let me ask you then, Zach, the Do You Believe In section, where I ask my guest whether or not they believe in the paranormality of the episode. So, Zach, do you believe in subliminal messaging?
I was wondering what you were going to ask me. Yes. I mean, it's a proven technique by advertisers. I mean, Scully even mentions it in this episode, have, shapes of, sexual imagery and blocks of ice and beer commercials and stuff like that. That's a thing, that occurred. Do I believe in it to this extent? Officially, no. Off the record, I'm sure. I mean, I'm not a lone gunman here. I'm not saying the government's experimenting on us, man, and we got to get to the bottom of it. But I think there's definitely things that they put in the public consciousness just to like to beta test, And anything this extreme, no, But yeah, I think you'd be naive to think there's not such a thing as subliminal messaging and advertisements or any form of media, because everybody has an agenda, and if any way they can, it's like Inception, right? They want to get underneath your thinking and implant an idea, so you make a decision you thought it was yours, but it really was theirs, and that's what marketers and psychologists are always brainstorming about. So absolutely, that's totally a real thing. So, ironically, one of the most believable episodes of The X-Files, I guess, in that respect, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And that really, I suppose the question more is, given that it does exist, is it morally right? And it's described as a subliminal message is an affirmation or a message, either auditory or visual, presented below the normal limits of human auditory or visual perception. So the subliminal signal might be inaudible to the conscious mind because it is below the conscious threshold of hearing, but audible to the unconscious or deeper mind, and might be an image transmitted briefly and unperceived consciously, and yet perceived unconsciously. So it's this idea of, is it moral to actually try and implant an idea or a suggestion or that you will like this through methods that aren't on the surface and aren't open about whatever someone's trying to sell you? And that's an interesting idea, because while it might be you might be able to do that, how do we know people aren't influencing us nefariously, like in this episode? How do we know that we're not being, that people who kill aren't being compelled to kill because they're getting some kind of subliminal suggestion somehow? We don't. It makes you wonder.
Unless they can psychologically prove that, and I guess maybe they have, but it's not that I say it that way. But I think at the end of the day, everyone is responsible for their own actions to a certain degree. I mean, that's like a slippery slope to be like, well, I wouldn't have killed these people, but they were sending me messages, right? The voices were telling me, right? So it's an interesting thing to consider because, I do believe we're all responsible for our own actions, but like, where do you draw that line? Like, okay, some technology or some psychology figured out a way to crack that and get inside your brain. That's tricky stuff, So that would not hold up in a court of law, I think. Is what I'm trying to say.
Well, yeah, exactly. It is an interesting idea. There's been some interesting cases of ideas of subliminal messaging. The ones that interest me are lyrics. You hear about this songs, a lot in lyrics,
like when people are shopping or whatever.
Yeah,
and Mulder mentions it in this episode.
Yeah, well, yeah, or also like people. There've been cases. There was one in 1985 of two Judas Priest fans who tried to kill themselves, and the parents claimed it was because of subliminal lyrics in the songs. And that went to court, and it didn't hold up, and things like that. So you've got a lot of interesting ideas with subliminal messaging, and obviously this episode takes them to the nth degree. But it is something that is good for storytelling, and you don't see a lot of actually, especially in this day and age. And it's an interesting concept.
Well, with social media and the way we're connected to technology, I mean, it's a good idea worth revisiting. So maybe maybe when Chris Carter's going through the pile of ideas for season 11. They can revisit not necessarily this, event and group of people, but an idea along these lines. I think it'd be a good way to bring the X-Files in the 21st century.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more, really. So, finally, let's do everyone's favourite part of the episode, and this is the X quiz. So, great. So, 5 questions and a quote on blood. Now, I don't know what your last score was, Zach, actually.
I don't know. It wasn't. I think Darkness Falls, and it wasn't very good. So I'm looking to rebound from last time. So I feel pretty prepared. But now that I say it, I know I shouldn't have said that. So now I've set myself up for failure. Bring it on, Tony. So
bring it on. Let's see. Okay, let's go. Question 1, and you'll get this one because you've already mentioned it. How much do the guys at Ed's workplace collect in their fund for him?
$100.
100 measly bucks. It's like, really? Great. Okay, well done. Off the grid. Number 2. What major cities does the town of Franklin now match per capita for death rates?
How many?
Do
I need to tell you?
It's 3 cities, but I'll give you the point if you can get one of them, at least.
All right. Los Angeles?
Yes, well done. You got the point, but can you name the other 2?
New York?
No.
Okay, all right. Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
Okay, 2 out of 3.
2 out of 3 is pretty good. The other
What's the third one?
The other one's Detroit.
Oh, of course, Detroit.
Detroit, yeah. But it's not the one you think. It's not the one I'd think of straight away either.
Yeah, well, Detroit has a bad reputation here in the States, so...
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
So that I believe that.
Yeah,
No offense to all our Michigan listeners out there.
We love you.
I live in the wild, wild west down here. So what do I have to say? Right?
Okay, so
all right, 2 for 2. All right,
2 for 2. That's pretty good. Yeah.
I'm going to stop now. I'm going to cash out.
Question 3: When the Lone Gunman's latest edition arrived at Mulder's, his subscription to what magazine on the same day meant that he didn't read their magazine? What else? What else did he get that he read first?
It was like Cinematic Skin or something. Is that?
Do I give you that? Do I give you that point? Yeah, I'll give you the point. Celebrity Skin.
Celebrity Skin.
So I'll give you that. I'll give you that point.
I mean, come on.
Yeah,
that's a deep cut there. So.
Okay, question 4. In what year did Ed Funch's wife die?
Okay, all right. I know they said 10 years ago, so it must be 1984.
Bingo! Well done, 1984. You're doing well here. This is good. You could be on. You could be on for full marks, actually.
See, now if I get all 6, you can take away the point that I
you
gave me to make it fair, right?
I think that equal it out. Yeah. What is the full name of the the setting of the climax of the episode.
Franklin Community College?
Yeah, because it's
Give me all these half points.
Community College blood drive. But yeah, it is at the college. Yeah. So, yeah, community college.
Okay.
Well done. 5. If you get this, if you get the quotes, you've won. You've got it. Okay, here we go.
Even with my half points.
Even with your half points, yeah.
Round up. All right, I like it. I'm not going to complain.
No, don't complain. Question 6. This is the quote. What kind of a crusade are you on?
Oh, the bureaucrat says that to Mulder.
He does. He does. Larry Winter.
Do I get that point?
You do get that point. Well done. Full marks. Excellent. Yes. Yeah.
All my half answers paid off.
I suppose technically it should be 5 out of 6, really, if you take the half points away. But
we can call it that if you want.
I don't know.
I don't know.
You were in the right area, so I think you deserve the full marks there.
All right, you're the judge, my friend. So you decide. So
okay, I'm gonna give you full mark. I'm in a good mood. I'm gonna give you full mark.
All right. Well, yeah, I think it's only fair, but how hard these questions
exactly
usually are. I appreciate the leniency in your judging. So, all right, I got 6 out of 6. All right, I called it. I didn't call it, but I did have a good feeling about this one.
That's it then. That brings us to the end of Blood, Episode 3, Season 2. We're underway. We're getting there. And you're going to be back later on in the season, Zach, for some more episodes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, there's some good ones, some really good ones coming up. But until you return...
good ones and some really bad ones, yes.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah.
Those are my favorite. That's usually my forte on this podcast. They're terrible.
It is. It's becoming Zach's thing in that you're going to appear on some of the worst episodes.
Oh, I love it. It's nothing more fun than ripping apart something you love, right?
Absolutely true. Until you do come back and destroy a few episodes with me, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me personally on Twitter at MoronZach. That's MOOREONZACH. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm also the host of my own podcast called Always Hold On to Smallville, where we talk about each and every episode of that young Superman TV show. And we're on Twitter at Always Smallville with 1 S.
I have to recommend Always Hold On to Smallville. It's a great podcast. It's really fun to listen to, and it gets into the same, enjoyable depth of Smallville without taking it too seriously, as hopefully we do.
Like you have to. If you take this stuff too seriously, I mean, you got to look at it. You got to be self-aware.
You do. You really do. Especially
part of the fun.
With 90s and noughties TV shows, you really do. So yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that recommendation.
No, it's great. It's great fun. So definitely check it out, guys. And season 2 is coming soon. So yeah, give it a watch. All right, and a listen, obviously. So yeah, we'll be back soon. Before then, you can find us at the X_cast on Twitter and on Facebook at the Xcast and at the xfcast@gmail.com. Do drop us some mail. We'll read out stuff on the show and let us know your thoughts on the episode and the season and anything else about the X-Files you'd like to know. And we're also on Libsyn, so you can find us there at the Xcast at .libsyn.com. You can find all our episodes on there. So next week, it's Sleepless. It is experiments, government people, and Mr. X. Ooh, exciting. So once again, big thanks, Zach.
Well, thank you, Tony. Always a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to next time.
Absolutely. Me too. And we'll be back next week, guys. But until then, as ever, remember, trust